The ketogenic diet, one of the more popular weight loss methods out right now. And I mean for good reason. It's pretty effective. There are people out there that are losing significant amount of weight from just changing what and how they eat. I mean, the fat just falls right off. We're talking 20, 30, 40, 80 plus pounds down from the ketogenic diet. I think that you should start right now. And then by the summertime, you get to act up in them streets. But the problem is, I still got the receipt for this bread. The problem is we've done this before. Yeah, we have. We were scrolling online and we saw how someone lost a significant amount of weight doing X. Feeling motivated and inspired, we try X. And now fast forward, now you're here watching me. Hey. Calories in minus calories out. That's where we landed because we understood that managing weight is about managing energy. To lose weight, we need to get rid of energy. So eat less of it, spend more of it. Sounds like small portions and endless cardio. Boom. But ain't no boom. You know deep down inside that there's more to it. There's more nuance to be explored. So we're gathering 10 all-time weight loss methods, dietary and exercise, and ranking them according to their difficulty, their sustainability, and their ability to assist you in weight loss in a classic YouTube tier list from S to F. But here's the catch. We're ranking them based on the most robust research that man can perform, the randomized controlled trial. Welcome to No Lab Coat Required. My name is Johnny Cole Dixon, and the ketogenic diet as a method is first up. The ketogenic diet is traditionally performed by increasing fat intake and decreasing, wait for it, and that's gonna fall. Eating less carbs, more fish, nuts, and avocado, less pasta, rice, and bread. The physiological changes that take place while you're on a ketogenic diet closely mimic that of fasting. And fasting was the running treatment for children that were suffering from uncontrollable seizures, epilepsy. Back then, the diet was modeled as 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight and limiting carbohydrate intake to just 10 to 15 grams a day. That's exactly 1 2-bite brownie a day, not a carbohydrate over. The remaining bites of the diet will all be fat. Decreasing carbs was way more sustainable than fasting, so they gave it a shot and boom, it worked. And then later down the line, we found out that this also works for weight loss. This randomized controlled trial took overweight and obese adults, 34 of them, and told them, hey, we're gonna have you lower carbs and eat high fat for a ketogenic diet. They ran them up against a group of folks instructed to eat about the same as most of us regularly do, about 50% of our plates being carbs. Participants were measured up prior, during, and after the study. They found the keto group dropped 12.1 pounds. The other group lost weight too. They ended up being 5.7 pounds lighter by the end of the 3-month trial. There's a problem. The study didn't report on how much of that weight loss was fat. Okay, you ask, Johnny, what's the big deal? Well, our muscle is the framework of our metabolism. One of the fuel sources of our muscle is fat. That is to say that muscle is where fat goes to die. Exclusively? No, we burn fat in many places in the body. But when it comes to seeing the scale number go down, right, the measuring tape shrink, muscle, or what we call lean mass, is virtually the only thing that matters. All right, I'm uncomfortable. What happens when you take it up a notch and make it more strict? Here's an RCT ran similarly to the first study, but this time carbs are capped at 20 grams for the keto group and fat and muscle was distinguished in the results. After 5 months, an average of 14.3 pounds were lost in the non-keto group, 10.5 being fat. For the keto group, 26.4 pounds was lost, with 20.7 pounds being fat. That's significant weight loss. But there it is, of that weight lost, over 20% was muscle. Gone. Losing muscle is often the harsh reality of losing weight sometimes, but researchers think there's something we can do about it. This RCT did the harshest keto yet at 20 grams of carbs a day on 18 untrained women. Ask me, untrained of what? Untrained of what, Johnny? Strength training. It's only 15 pounds. It was the keto diet over 2 months, but this time we're pumping iron. Participants were put on a resistance training regimen to coincide with the study. These ladies ended up losing 12.3 pounds of weight. Get this, every single pound was fat, lean mass preserved. Lifting weights saved the ladies in this study from losing muscle. The ketogenic diet, well, it's been effective for years. When we're in keto mode, our body is running off of ketones, which are a direct conversion from the fat on our body. Difficulty, we love our bread. It's not a walk in the park, but it's doable. Across the studies I mentioned, we're looking at about 1.1 pounds lost a week. I'd say that's fairly sustainable. Effectiveness, it gets the weight off. Just gotta watch out for that muscle loss. The keto diet, A tier. All right, now this next diet is really lacking in RCT power, but it's just so popular. that I just had to include it in this one. Yeah, you see that? We're talking carnivore. If you start talking carnivore on the internet, a percentage of the comments is going to be a clan of people praising the carnivore diet. It's healing up cancers, it's reversing chronic disease, it's fixing lazy eyes. But unlike every other intervention on today's list, carnivore's evidence for greatness is almost exclusively anecdote. Carnivore is achieved by the total or near total elimination of plant-based foods. You know, meat, eggs, whole bunch of that. Animal products, meat only. Meat ain't cheap though. I just thought about it. Is this a rich people diet? The carnivore diet is actually ketogenic as a side effect. And the reason I had to include it is because there's some serious merit behind its potential impact on weight loss. In fact, 84% of people that took the study in this article said they engaged with carnivore for weight loss purposes. The elimination of carbs and that focus on high protein, that's gotta be a recipe for something interesting. Researchers did something fascinating to test the power of high protein. They told nearly 150 folk to cut calories by 500, but then after a month, let's bring them back. But only half of you will receive an additional 48 grams of protein per day on top of that. Well, in the first month, everybody lost weight. But then when the calories were added back, the weight came back for these folks. 4.4 pounds on average to be exact. 3.1 of those pounds were fat, except for the folks that had additional protein. For these folks, all weight regained was muscle. So what does all of this mean? Well, what the research is getting at is that there's something about protein that communicates something totally different to the body than other food groups. In fact, so different that after a phase of cutting, when you return back to those calories and choose protein instead of carbohydrate, that can be the difference between putting on muscle and just regaining fat. Oh, but the high protein story does not end there. Folks in this phase study got their protein in at every meal: eggs, peanut butter, turkey breast, beef. Participants were told eat when hungry, stop when satisfied. They dropped just about 11 pounds over the course of 12 weeks. About 2.7 pounds of that was muscle loss though. But here's the difference. Participants in this study ended up eating less calories on accident, about 440 less calories daily, because that high protein intake was just that satiating. So instead of losing muscle and being hungry and lethargic because of that calorie deficit, they actually lost muscle, but they were full and satiated and just kind of smaller people in general. If you're a hardcore tracker, these are the intake numbers to consider for protein based on scientific literature. If you're not much of a food counter, consider this. We usually eat most of our protein for dinner. This paper found the consumption of moderate amount of protein each meal does a better job at stimulating muscle protein synthesis in a 24-hour cycle than does heavily skewing protein intake toward the evening meal. So no useful research out on carnivore specifically, but when we look at high protein as an intervention, it's relatively easy. With an average 96% retention rate in the studies I reviewed, it's dang sustainable. Now, at first I was concerned that high protein may not be the primary mover of the weight loss in these studies, but here's one that didn't cut calories at all and found that swapping out carbs for protein on a low-fat diet netted nearly 17 pounds of fat mass lost over 6 months. The way protein sets our metabolism up for greatness and supports lean mass, we gotta go S tier. Not real. $14 on Amazon. Tax write-off. All right, this next intervention is all the rage for you young, cool, hip gangsters. Show them the legs. Walking! I came to this location just for these walking statues. This is gonna be one of the more insightful sections out of this entire video. And I was a huge proponent of walking coming into this video, so let's see if I was delusional or not. Let's see what the research says about walking for weight loss. These researchers gathered 82 overweight and obese folks and were like, hey, we're gonna have you guys eat 800 calories less and go on a brisk walk for 3 hours a day. Oh, sorry, I misread that. 3 hours a week. And they were going 3.7 miles an hour. That looks something like this. They compared these brisk walkers up to a group doing the same calorie cutting, but no walking. The non-walkers lost just over 15 pounds and the brisk walkers dropped just over 19 pounds. Not half bad, but question is, should we walk on a full or an empty stomach? That's a common curiosity. I love getting up before breakfast and taking a little morning stroll. Show my feet, I'm strolling, show my feet. Well, this study found something totally unexpected after putting a group of fasted and a group of fed folks on a 45-minute treadmill workout. We say, hey, I just ate. I'm not going to be able to get at what I'm trying to get at, right? My body won't be able to use my fat as energy if I just ate, right? Because last in, first out. That's why it's better to work out on an empty stomach. I wish that it was that linear. The study that we're talking about draws attention to the fact that when we're exercising, we release cortisol. All right, now lean in, because this is important for not just the people who want to walk, but for everybody in here. We call cortisol the stress hormone, but that is a bit of a disservice to its function because cortisol doesn't cause stress. It's just called upon to help us regulate it. So what is cortisol doing when it is released into the blood? Well, we're exercising and we need stuff. We need energy. So cortisol goes along and it loosens up the grip the body has on sugar. But watch out, it loosens up the grip the body has on muscle as well, getting ready to use these things up as energy. Cortisol is a catabolic hormone. It is breaking things down, right? Catabolic means to break things down. So we have these energy substrates in the blood as we're exercising, but watch out, this catabolic state that we're in is actually pronounced when we're fasting. So if the goal for weight loss is to keep the muscle and lose the fat, which allow me to reassure you that that is the goal, what the researchers are suggesting is that it's probably better to have something on the stomach that the body can work with. If you guys are getting value out of this video, man, please leave a like. And we're just getting started. There's so many more interesting interventions to go through. But listen, there's a problem with that study that we were just talking about. The first two studies we were just talking about. The first one was with people in a calorie deficit. The other one was with young 20-year-old fit men. So let's look at 25 overweight postmenopausal women. This one suggested by Feeling Like a Sir, a member of our Patreon. Walking only, half the women walking fast and the other half walking slow. After 30 weeks, easily 4.4 pounds was lost. Walking, difficulty, that's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Sustainability, oh come on, what are we talking about? Effectiveness, the narrative I ran it, you can tell nothing's in here. The narrative I ran into while digging up the studies on walking is that no study was really willing to do walking as a standalone intervention to measure weight loss. And there seems to be a general consensus in understanding that walking, much to my disappointment, doesn't really do much to reduce the scale number or really shrink the inches. And although walking may not do that much for the actual scale number, the first study we were talking about showed the participants had a significantly reduced fasting insulin level. And that's not nothing. Walking, at least as a standalone intervention, C tier. This next intervention seems to do something uniquely special. Out of all of the research that I can recall reviewing, this one seems to target that stomach. 2, 3, 98, 99, 100. Whew. All right, now this next intervention, it's something. It's not the 100 sit-ups I just did though. This intervention is called high intensity interval training, or HIIT. HIIT is performed by doing something hard for an unsustainable short duration and then taking a rest and then repeating. There seemed to be a mention of targeting stomach fat or visceral fat in basically every study that I reviewed. Now I'm biased towards HIIT. It's not even fun. You gotta watch out for me. I'm like, hey, did you try HIIT? Hey, did you try HIIT? My girlfriend just broke up with me. Did you try HIIT? I'm being audited by the IRS. Did you try HIIT? High intensity interval training was literally running the streets when I came to the game. So that may explain my bias, but it's the love child of cardio and actually, this is gonna be a long video, and actually enjoying your exercise. The researchers of this study took some overweight men and told them run, not jog, your butt off for 1 minute, then take a rest, jog, and repeat. While you're at it, you'll be eating healthy food, but about 430 calories less than usual. Now, let's talk difficulty, because it's not really considered high intensity until you're working at least 85% of your heart rate reserve. Basically, for whatever high intensity exercise that you're doing, you shouldn't be able to maintain it for over 60 seconds. And the shorter that duration of sustainability, the higher the intensity the exercise is considered. To give you a frame of reference, Olympic sprinters can't even sprint at their top speed for even 10 seconds. So participants in this study ran because running is arguably the most effective form of HIIT, but unfortunately, it's also the least feasible because everybody doesn't have the facilities and or sometimes even the body to engage in a full-on sprint. The HIIT exercisers in this study lost 10.6 pounds, but we wouldn't be able to tell if it was HIIT doing the trick if we didn't compare it to anything. So they had another another group of people going on an even bigger calorie restriction, but with no exercise. These non-exercise folks lost 11 pounds, but just over 3 pounds of that was precious muscle. For the 10.6 pounds the HIIT group lost, all of them were fat. Lean mass preserved. Okay, if we don't do running, how can we perform HIIT? Mountain climbers, high knees, stationary bikes are really good. But what's interesting about it is that if you perform HIIT, you're like a primary candidate for Element. Element are our longtime channel partners. They're powering this video. Let me tell you about it. Element is all about proper hydration. So long are those days that we refuel up with those sports drinks that we've been putting up with those unnecessary ingredients. Element likes to keep it simple. It's literally salt in a packet. Sodium and potassium, our principal electrolytes, are in there, as well as magnesium, in which our diets don't tend to carry as much these days. And it's also another powerful electrolyte, so that's in there as well. Hydration has everything to do with electrolytes, and our electrolytes have everything to do with everything else. You're not thinking a thought, moving a muscle, or doing a single jumping jack without sodium. Element has been sharing how important this sodium intake is for those of us that are active, or in the sun, or sweating, or we're fasting. And for me, I'm not really sold on filling, so my tangible difference was when the cramps that I was suffering from as a runner went completely away after I started taking some more sodium and giving my freaking nervous system what it needed to perform. The more you move, the more you use. Replenish what we lose from exercising, right? Sweaty HIIT sessions. Click the link in my description. Their website has info on how you can properly hydrate without spending a dime on them. But in the event that you do, get the chocolate. It's delicious. Plus, with that link, you'll be able to get a free sample pack with any purchase, whether you have done this before or you're new to the game. Thank you, Element, for being a partner of No Lab Coat Required. Difficulty: if you know that you're the type that can go to the gym consistently 2 to 3 times a week, I imagine HIIT not being too scary because you can show up, but the execution of it, that's the hard part. Sustainability? Oh, it's highly sustainable. Effectiveness: now, in this study, they did a HIIT protocol on indoor bikes, obese folk, but there was no dietary intervention. I repeat, no dietary intervention. And after 8 weeks of HIIT, get this, there was no significant body composition differences. Another reminder that no matter how powerful the exercise is, you can't out-exercise a bad diet. But because it preserves muscle and has a crazy advantageous effect on your blood sugar and insulin sensitivity, we gotta rank it decently. HIIT, B tier. All right, this next intervention is as straightforward as it gets. If losing weight is about food intake, what would happen if we don't eat at all? Intermittent fasting. A fast typically isn't rolling until about 12 hours of no food. The fast is actually the original keto. You see, when we fast, our body is running off of ketones, which we know are directly produced from the fat on our body. Fasting generally puts the body in a catabolic state. We'll find the body breaking things down for energy, right? And not only that, the longer that we fast, the greater the emphasis on this catabolism, right? Breaking things down for energy. And if we're focused on breaking things down, the body isn't necessarily interested in building. So we know that fasting proposes the problem of absolutely eating away at our muscles. We may start to feel sluggish. Our metabolism may even slow down. But these researchers thought there was something we could do about this problem. They looked at 8 separate fasting intervention studies. Participants were put on 16-hour fast, 20-hour fast, 1 meal a day, but they included resistance training to pair with the fast regimen. They found muscle was generally maintained, and some studies reported an increase in lean body mass. Worthy of note was also the participants' protein intake, which ranged from 1.2 to 1.9 grams per kilogram a day. There's quite the variety in protocol when it comes to fasting. So in this video, I went over 6 fasting methods, the science behind them, and ultimately the impact it had on folks' waistline. Watch that next if you're interested in taking up fasting. Fasting is arguably the most difficult thing on today's list. Let's not play about it. Sustainability is also low. In fact, studies with fasting interventions have some of the highest dropout rates out there. The weight loss is nothing particularly impressive when using fasting as the only intervention either. In that fasting video that I made previously, there were interventions from 8 to 52 weeks, right? An entire year, and the weight loss generally just kind of hovered around 10 pounds. Fasting is great for so many things, right? Clarity, discipline, intentionality is huge, but if you go into it and you don't have a smart intervention to couple it with, in terms of weight loss results, you're gonna walk away disappointed. I would go C tier, but fasting is hard and not as sustainable. Still do it though. D tier, but still do it though.
Every now and then I'll find, say, fuzzy M&M. You just peel the protective coating and you've got a nice little dose of simple carbohydrates.
Intervention number 6, low carb. Low carb is produced by decreasing the percentage of carbohydrates you have in a day. There is no general consensus for the threshold of low carb. Like, when exactly are you in low carb mode? Is it when you're having 40% carbohydrates in the diet, 30% carbohydrates in the right? We'll talk a little bit more about this, but I'm sure you're probably wondering, what's the difference between low carb and keto? On paper, the difference would be that fat component. In keto, we're technically saying, hey, let's increase the fat that we intake. But when it comes to low carb, it's like, hey, forget whatever else you got to do with anything. Let's just get rid of carbs. Participants in this randomized controlled trial were told to cut carbohydrates down to no more than 20 grams per day. That's about 1 bite of a 2-bite brownie and a Capri Sun. They ate as much protein and fat as they wanted. Then they gradually increased carbs as the study went on. By the 3-month mark, they had dropped nearly 7% of their body weight. That's about 15 pounds in 90 days. The low carb group in this study was paired up against a conventional just reduce your calories group to answer the question of what's better, cutting calories or rearranging them. These researchers weren't the only ones that were asking this question. I found study after study after study, so much curiosity to the point to where I found 3 separate meta-analyses, right, that bundled up all of these studies just to get an answer. And it turns out cutting carbs, rearranging the calories, right, may be doing a little better. Because it was true for the first study and overwhelmingly true for all the other studies that put carb cutting up against other dietary interventions. As this meta-analysis states, low-carb diets are associated with a moderately greater weight loss than non-carbohydrate restricted diets in the short term. So in other words, cutting calories or going low fat, right, these other dietary interventions that were popular in these meta-analysis, they can get you there, but they just probably won't be as effective as paying attention to them carbs. Difficulty. Well, carbs are everywhere, and if you ask the average person their favorite food, it's probably going to be carb-based. It's hard, but it's not impossible. Sustainability? Ooh boy, I thought fasting experiments had low retention rates. One of my meta-analysis revealed a 41% average dropout rate. Effectiveness? It does the job. Low carb, A tier. All right, this next one is for those of us that just absolutely love treadmills. We're talking cardio, baby.
What if you're obese, hadn't done a lick of exercise in who knows how long, and 5 people in a lab coat grabbed you off your couch, brought you into a laboratory under direct supervision, and had to do 45 minutes of heart-pounding cardio 5 times a week? Well, you'd be a participant in this next study. You look great. So we asked him to model cardio for this shot, but he's not obese.
Researchers wanted to know the impact cardio and cardio alone has on weight loss. As there were no dietary restrictions in this study, it was ad libitum, eat whatever you want, however you want, whoever you want, 4 months in, the men of the study lost just over 6 pounds, nearly 12 by 9 months, then they plateaued. For the women, 4 months in, 9 months in, 16 months in, they were the same weight.
The good news is that neither group lost a ton of muscle. The bad news is that, well, shoot, they spent 16 months on a treadmill and they don't have any physical changes to show for it. Again, whether it be HIIT or cardio, we often need a dietary intervention in order to get results.
In fact, this study took sedentary obese folk, put them on either cardio or HIIT interventions, and there was some weight loss, but the results were finicky. The authors couldn't statistically pin the weight loss as a result of the intervention. There was just too much individual variability.
In other words, cardio can be hit or miss. Well, at least for the 40 to 50-year-olds in this study. Okay, what about cardio versus strength training?
Here's a study that included people as young as 18, obese folk, calories restricted by 30%. You were either in a cardio or a strength or a both group. Interestingly, researchers found an across-the-board similar amount of weight loss after 22 weeks. Of course, the strength group kept the most muscle, but at over 23 pounds lost over 22 weeks for the cardio group, this is one of the more colossal returns on investment of everything we've talked about so far. Difficulty? It's not hard per se, but it is hard to keep up with. The last study had decent retention rates because they allowed folk to choose their own cardio, running, cycling, elliptical.
I find the case of the treadmill and a stair stepper particularly funny because there's always somebody very miserable on there, like outwardly miserable, like they're slouched over, just kind of dragging and stepping the whole time.
Effectiveness. Cardio alone gets you virtually nowhere weight-wise. You start to change up the eating habits and cardio shows up as well as the rest of it. This one's tough. If there was a tier between B and C, I'd put it right there, but because HIIT in research at least does a better job at getting directly at fat, right? That intensity really makes all the difference, and it still preserves muscle better. I can't put these two on the same level. Cardio, C tier.
You look great, my guy. That wraps it up. That's good.
I mean, I don't eat red meat at all. I'm a vegetarian.
What happens to weight when we go plant-based? Plant-based eating describes a diet that emphasizes a large proportion of plant-dominant foods. Examples of plant-based include vegan and vegetarian diets. Definitions can range from the exclusion of all animal products to having varying quantities of meat, dairy, and fish, right? The way I see it, if you're eating 85 to 90% plants, I'm calling that plant-based.
Now is probably the best time to talk about bias. Oh, you want to talk about bias when you get to the plant-based stuff? Yes, because trying to find unbiased plant-based research is like trying to navigate a minefield. There's always some big animal welfare or vegan organization behind a lot of this research. But this isn't a problem exclusive to just the plant-based industry. This is also an issue when it comes to big meat as well. In fact, something I mentioned earlier, I think has a conflict of interest when I was talking about high intake of protein. You could check my personal notes. I tend to note conflict of interest. Bias exists in two lanes in scientific research: personal and financial. We all have inherent bias, and scientists are no different. I mean, they're passionate about what they study, and they design their experiments, and they go into them wanting to believe something. Financial bias boils down to a company wanting to do favorable research on their product so they can sell it. And then there's the case of an organization looking to scientifically affirm what they believe so they can put the study on their website. Oftentimes, if the research is not in their favor, I mean, the paper probably won't even get published. That's why when you do a quick Google search on a subject, it's not as easy, specifically when you come to these very binary subjects, to find a paper that is not connected to XYZ organization. Now, I'm telling you all of this because my goal is to never make these videos and have papers that are just completely void of bias. Well, for one, that's a tall ask. But for two, I'm communicating that I understand this issue, and I want to ensure you that I'm doing my best to filter research based on its quality, as all work will have some inkling of bias. It is the degree that it infiltrates the methodology that is the actual concernable problem. Is concernable a word? Lastly, I'll say that personally, I'm still learning how all of this works as well.
The plant-based diet, 0% meat, was the prescription given to 38 cool kids. And by cool kids, I mean middle-aged, overweight men and women. They were paired up against a group of folks instructed to keep their dietary pattern the same. They were a control group. Researchers wanted to know, can we actually do the opposite of most studies? Can we increase carbohydrate intake for weight loss? Yep, that's right. The control group was eating about 46%, while the vegan dieters were eating 70% carbs every day. There's just no way the vegan group lost any weight knocking back all them carbs, yeah? At the end, the control group's weight didn't change. As for the vegan group, 13 pounds skimmed right off the top. Now the study has some of that bias funding that we were just talking about, but I still wanted to include it because it isn't until you start digging into some of the plant-based research that you start to see the conversation around carbohydrate quality. Because this is a carbohydrate, but so is this. What's the difference? Whole, intact fiber. Fiber makes all the difference when we're talking about blood sugar impact, the resulting insulin, how fulfilling the food is, and the list goes on. If you want to learn more about fiber, check out this video I made not too long ago. By the 16-week mark, the vegan participants were knocking back 14.3 grams more fiber a day over the control group. That isn't not nothing. Every 10 grams of additional insoluble fiber, that's the fiber that turns into poop, was associated with a 2-pound reduction in weight. I'm ready to plug this sucker in. Plant-based diet, I mean, it's easy. It's certainly sustainable, just takes a conscious shift. Plant-based, in my definition of at least 85% of your plate veggieing it up, I like it. More fiber, A tier.
Let's play a game. This right here, this is junk food. Chocolate-covered pretzel. About 5 of these will net you 140 calories. You've already eaten 1900 for the day and you want to stay under 2000 before the day's up. Question is, how many of these can you have? I actually don't know. Genuinely, somebody tell me in the comments.
Calorie restriction, that's the name of the game, isn't it? Counting your food. This method involves calculating your calorie intake and your calorie expenditure in order to create an energy deficit. Question is, does this work for weight loss? You tell me. 332 overweight and obese folks joined a study where the women cut calories by 1,000 a day, the men cut calories by 1,200 a day. And researchers knew this was probably going to do the trick for weight loss, so they wanted to shake things up a bit. Let's compare this group to people cutting the same amount but alternating week to week. So one week they're cutting, next week they're back to normal, and repeat. Let's then add another group of folks cutting calories by 500 a day, but only 2 days out of the week. After 1 year of these diets, group 1 slightly edged out the other 2, but the authors note the difference as being statistically insignificant. Johnny, a little measly 14 pounds over 1 year? Well, kinda. Participants actually found the most weight loss about 6 months in, 18 pounds down. The longer the study went on, the more weight each group was regaining. Just eating less is supposed to be one of the tried and true methods for losing weight, but nobody wants to put in this much effort. I mean, this study was a year long. Nobody wants to put in this much effort just to regain. Not to mention how difficult it is to stay on track with this. Out of the 336 people that entered this study, only 146 walked out of it. But Johnny, to some degree, you have to eat less in order to lose weight, right? Like, that's the only way this thing works. Like, calorie deficit, that's gotta be scientific law, right? Well, I've never been in law school, so I don't know. But I will say, let's rank this after we go over our next intervention. I'll tell you why in a bit.
I exercise a lot, Gus. I lift weight.
Intervention number 10, strength training.
Strength training, the use of muscles against resistance to build strength, muscle endurance, and skeletal muscle mass. Whew, there is so much weight. This study took sedentary obese folk and cut their calories. They were separated into groups. One did some typical cardio, stair-stepping, treadmill, that kind of thing. One group did strength training, and another group did both. And of course, there was a control group. Half a year, these folks were working. And the strength training group lost the most fat and kept the most muscle. This is just one model study of how effective this intervention is of strength training at actually changing the body composition in a favorable way. This meta-analysis of 114 studies found the same trend to be true, stating resistance-based exercise combined with the caloric restriction are the most effective. Now you take the calorie restriction and you separate that from the strength training, and we're looking at some of the same results we were getting when we looked at cardio, HIIT, walking, right? Better blood levels of basically everything, but not that much of an actual change in weight. Okay, what about this? Sometimes the best way to avoid bias in research is to look at results of studies that's not primarily measuring what you're looking for. Here's 2 studies primarily measuring things other than weight with the strength training intervention. This one found the same narrative we've been talking about to be true. Although cardio has a more pronounced impact on our insulin levels, resistance training has that protective effect on our muscles. The second study says, hey, do both, as their strength and cardio combination group ended up losing the most fat compared to the groups that did one intervention alone. So back to calorie restriction, because honestly, going into this video, I wasn't the biggest fan because I'm a big proponent of sustainability. And how sustainable is it to walk around and have to count and weigh every morsel of food, right? And plus it's just bad etiquette. You go over to your in-laws and you're like, hey, did you weigh that chicken first? But what I had to come to grips with is that calorie restriction is not really about walking around miserably hungry all day, but more so to do with departing from being chronically fed, right? We all have a threshold in which excess energy is going to go somewhere, and it's going to transform into fat to be stored and used for later. Okay, calorie restriction alone, no fun at all, right? But it is, to a degree, the name of the game. It's just hard for me personally to tell people to go out and start counting calories because our cardio machines and our nutrition labels will turn us into mathematicians real quick, and it's just not sustainable. But I will say, because of calorie restriction's ability to combine with basically everything on this list and in turn produce favorable results, we gotta be fair. Calorie restriction, A tier. And for strength training, easy, sustainable, effective, S tier, argue with your mama. When it comes to losing weight, there is no one size fits all, but all of these fit all sizes. Some work best in combination: strength plus keto, cardio plus strength plus hypocaloric, keto plus HIIT, HIIT plus high protein, plant-based in strength, walking plus strength plus hypocaloric, perhaps high protein plus hypocaloric. Don't be overwhelmed, be empowered. I hope you guys gained some insight and perspective out of this one. I'm gonna get about y'all way.
No, you don't get into a caloric deficit. You don't burn enough calories just walking.
Yeah, I'm gonna get those comments too. Like, we know that you just need a calorie deficit. All of this is a 40-minute wasted video. I just wasted 40 minutes of my life.